A warm welcome to this feast of thought. This video is a personal tribute to begin with, or rather, it's a tribute to friendship. And the inspiration behind this tribute, quite naturally, is a friend. So a good friend is someone who compels you in his own genial, gentle ways to be philosophical about friendship also, without his knowing it, and that's the beauty of it. I'm rarely person-specific in the videos I post on this channel, but today I need to make a difference. I'm going to deviate from that discipline. I want to introduce a friend of mine whom I greatly cherish. And I do so because he's just completing 85 years of blessed life upon planet Earth. His name is Dr. Zach Verghese. He lives in London, but it doesn't matter to me where he lives. What matters to me is that he has been a good friend, an undeviating, sturdy, steadfast friend who stood with me, stood by me through thick and thin, through 3 decades, which is a great deal more than what I can say about many others. Dr. Zach Verghese turns 85 on the 21st of July this year. Now, I propose to divide the content of this video into 2 sections. First of all, a few words personal about Dr. Zach Verghese, one who has tremendous achievements in his professional field. He was part of the team that pioneered liver transplant in the UK. He has generations of students who have benefited from his pedagogic skills as well as his personal stature, personal qualities. And he has also reached out to people in need, far and wide, particularly people in Pakistan, of all places. I do not want to make it a song of praise for Dr. Zach as a person, but let me say something about the friendship I've had the privilege of building with him and the friend that he is as a person. Whenever I think of Dr. Zach, I'm reminded of the 47th verse of the first chapter of the Gospel of John. There, Jesus says something about a person called Nathaniel. And the beautiful thing about Nathaniel is so very true about Dr. Zach. Nathaniel, in the eyes of Jesus, was a man without guile, a guileless man. There was no guile in him. My dear friends, that is saying a lot. That's saying a lot. Perhaps this is one of the highest statements one can make about the beauty of a human being. I just commend it to your thought without tarrying over it for any amount of time. A second thing I need to mention, which is related to this, is that the personality of Dr. Zach was done by God in very subtle, light outlines. We are living in a time of loud people, and everything must be loud. Sound must be deafening. Colors must be blinding. Life must be lived big, bold, beautiful. In this context, we must remember the experience of Prophet Elijah, the still small voice that spoke to him. There is a case to be made for the subtle, the soft. So Zach belonged to that category of people which is now becoming nearly extinct. The third thing I would perhaps mention very quickly about him, and this is something that I greatly cherish and perhaps is one of the main reasons why we've been able to stay friends for such a long time, Dr. Zach is genuinely a lifelong learner. Whenever I have opened up opportunities for people to come together, learn together, think together, Dr. Zach was invariably there. Some 3 years ago, I opened an online course. He was one of the earliest to register. That course finished, I started the second course. He was the first register. And he endured till the end. Very few people. In fact, the first course I started with about 60 people. It got diminished to about 20. 40 good Malayalis, Syrian Christians, fell by the wayside. But Dr. Zach endured to the end. And that's because he's a genuine lifelong learner. The fourth thing I would very quickly mention about him is that he's a man of instinctive goodness. Doing what is good and righteous comes unlabored, instinctive and spontaneous to him. Those who have experienced him would readily agree with me, and I do not propose to give specific instances, illustrations, for want of time. It's another quality that I associate with him, a quality that I have not been able to cultivate, though I appreciate the value of it. Jesus in the Beatitude said, "Blessed are the meek." If anyone was ever meek, in my experience, it was Dr. Zach. But there are times I used to feel that his meekness bordered on timidity. Perhaps he could have been a little more assertive, bold, forthright, but who am I to judge? Though I must say that there have been a few occasions when I was inclined to feel that perhaps he could have been a little more assertive. But above all, as is but obvious, Dr. Zach has a capacity unmatched by any, in my experience, perhaps somewhat rivaled by by Swami Agnivesh, who is now no more. He died 2 years ago. In my experience, these two had a tremendous capacity to build and maintain friendships, something at which I am so poor, and I wish God had given me this gift to a fuller measure. Now on this occasion, I cannot but recollect the last visit Dr. Zach made to me. He came home in Trivandrum, spent about 10-15 minutes with me. I could see that all through the time that he spent in my house. He was very thoughtful, quieter than usual, somewhat pensive. I didn't want to react to it because I had an intuition of what it was about. As Dr. Zach was about to leave, this 85-year-old man walked up to me, embraced me. He wept on my shoulders and he said, "Perhaps I'll never see you again." I've not had such an emotionally rich moment for a long time. And I value it a great deal, Dr. Zach. It shows who you are, and I love you for it. So, how did I feel when Dr. Zach bid adieu to me? At that time, unknown to Dr. Zach, another person from a distant period, a distant place in geography came to my mind. Perhaps some of you would know his name. He was a great emperor, perhaps widely acknowledged to be the wisest emperor history has ever seen. A Roman emperor who lived in the 2nd century AD. He died, I think, AD 180, sometime thereabout. His name is Marcus Aurelius. Are you familiar with that name? Marcus Aurelius. Please look him up. Just Google Marcus Aurelius, and if you have more time, please read his books, Thoughts. Just imagine, thoughts, a king and thoughts. And the great thing and the challenging thing about Marcus Aurelius was that even when he was on the battlefield, he was leading a rich intellectual life. He was noting down some of his rare thoughts as he was guiding the battle. That's the kind of man Marcus Aurelius was. On another occasion, I'll tell you more about Marcus. The story is fascinating. But what I want to highlight now in this context, as relevant to the case of Dr. Zach's visit to me, is the sense of pathos that Marcus experienced towards the fag end of his life. Unfortunately, a great rift came about between him and his wife. His son was proving a rogue, to the great heartbreak of this wise, benign father and king. And even more painfully, many of his friends were leaving him one after the other. Now, the last section in his book of thoughts are all connected to this period. A period in which Marcus is living alone with his philosophy, which fewer and fewer and fewer people shared with him. In other words, those who shared his view of life, his philosophical tastes, interests, insights, left him one after the other, and he was getting increasingly isolated in his intellectual life. And his predicament may be likened to, and that's how I feel, my own situation at the moment, like that of an island somewhere out in the deep sea, which is constantly submerging. The water level is rising, the island is sinking, and soon the island will be seen no more. That was the predicament of this great king, perhaps the wisest king history has ever seen, Marcus Aurelius. Read him up. It's really incredible. So, as Dr. Zach Verghese left my home that day, I felt like Marcus Aurelius, increasingly being isolated. And those who shared a similar interest with him, philosophical interest, vanishing from the landscape of his life one after the other. And this wise old man, this great king, this benign, benevolent king, feeling acutely and increasingly isolated. In that, my dear friends, I capture an irreducible truth about the human predicament, but I know this stuff is too heavy for most people, therefore I may not dwell too much with it. But I need to flag this. Now, let me now enter the second part of this video, which is a general reflection on friendship. Why do I do that? Because when I thought as to what birthday gift I could offer to Dr. Zach, I have never given him any gift. I don't give gifts in general, though I must say that I've received thousands of gifts. Even when I plead with people not to bring me gifts, some of them still do. That's another story. But what shall I offer to Dr. Zach Verghese on this, the 85th birth anniversary of my good friend? You know, like Solomon, Dr. Zach preferred wisdom above all else. And I have already said that he is a genuine, keen, lifelong learner, someone who is forever in love with understanding, with someone who is never tired of thinking. And as I said, till the other day, he was doing an online course with me, completed 2 online courses with me. Dr. Zach's keenness to learn also reminds me of another person whom I was very happy to be friends with. I must mention him. He's a Muslim. He's a Muslim Maulana. Maybe some of you know his name. He lives in Delhi. Probably he is now no more. When I became friends with him years ago, he was already 82. By then he had published about 104 books, all of them on Islam. His name is Maulana Waiduddin Khan. He used to write regularly in the Times of India and other newspapers. And we became part of a movement, Swami Agnivesh and I started, called Adhyatma Jagran Manch, another movement titled Religions for Social Justice. So we used to work together on many areas. I have spent a lot of time with this wise, old, this venerable man. It was so uplifting, elevating to be with him. And what struck me most is the passionate keenness this old man had to learn. His English wasn't very good. He was a very profound Islamic scholar. He knew Persian, Arabic, Urdu, Hindi, everything. But he also wanted to brush up on his English. So he was very keen to have conversation with me. But he would always keep a book beside him. And whenever I said something that he thought was new or beautiful, he would immediately take up the book and note it down. And the next time I met him, he would repeat it. That kind of a man. Anyway, so Dr. Zach was something similar. So let me now, as an offering to my friend, make some very simple reflections on friendship. As an introduction to that, let me make a reference to the 31st chapter of the book of Proverbs in the Bible, verse 10, but this is a verse that doesn't refer to friendship at all. It refers to wives. So I'll read the text. Who can find a good wife? Who can find a good wife? For she is worth far more than rubies that make one rich. That rubies that make one rich. So I will adapt this verse, the 10th verse of the 31st chapter of the book of Proverbs in the Old Testament, and say, who can find a good friend? Who can find a good friend? Now, therefore, let me offer these reflections to a good friend on the scope of friendship. My very first thought about friendship is that friendship is an unmatched means to bring out the best from a human being. Who is a good friend to you? Oh, what will I be like if I'm a good friend to you? My topmost priority would be not to take advantage of you, not to derive some benefit because of you, but to try and endeavor to the utmost to bring up and bring out the best in you. So friendship is a catalyst for bringing out the best in the other friend, the other person who is in this friendship. And therefore, the question that I have always asked myself, a question that still puzzles me, to be frank with you, is, do I have the capacity to be a good friend? Am I a good friend? Rather than sitting and lamenting over the fact that I have not had many good friends, which is also true, I think the even more fundamental question to ask is, do I have the capacity to be a good friend? And this I have to say, not by way of defending myself, I have to say that if you opt the path of scholarship, of reading, reflection, writing, unknowingly and without even wanting it, you slip into an orbit of solitude. You get absorbed into a world of ideas which take you in all kinds of directions, and therefore you live in a state of abstraction. And that seriously affects with social life as well as the time and energy that you are left with to invest in good friendship. So I have to say that yes, I did not do creditably on this front. Now, a good friend is someone who ennobles you, one who empowers the good that is within you to find expression, someone who rejoices in your goodness, your progress, your development, your fulfillment, your achievement. And a good friend is someone who does not use his friend as a tool. Because with Immanuel Kant, I believe that the ultimate crime against humanity is to degrade a human being into a tool, an instrument. Every human being, says Immanuel Kant, must be treated as the ultimate value in this world, the end rather than the means. Now, again, I must apologize for being a bit autobiographical. About a couple of years ago, an old college mate of mine came to visit me. He's still He's alive, he's in Trivandrum. I wouldn't want to mention his name. And as he reminisced the time we shared as young college students, he told me, and something I had completely forgotten, that whenever I met him, I would whisper verses from the Bible into his ears. Because those were the days I was learning the New Testament by heart, not because I wanted to be a very spiritual person or wanted to be in later life a priest, but because I wanted to learn the English language. And the only way I could do that was by learning the Bible in the King James's version by heart, which I did to a large extent. So each time I committed a passage, a biblical text to memory, I would be greatly excited, and I had to sort of dump it on somebody, experiment it on somebody, and this good friend of mine was a happy, willing victim. So I used to do this, and I have completely forgotten. But then he told me that that particular experience encouraged him to become a good reader himself, and he is now a good author. I've read 6 of his books with great profit. If it were not inopportune to mention his name, I would have mentioned the titles and the author, because I believe these are books that every well-meaning person should read. Now let me return to Zach. His last words to me: maybe we will never meet again. It made me sad. It also made me glad. Well, glad in retrospect, sad prospectively. Glad that there was such a good thing in my life. Sad that it's maybe coming to an end. Who knows? We might meet again. But going by the words of my friend, it could well be that we don't meet again. So what? So what? What's important is that we did meet some 30 years ago. And it matters a great deal to me, Zach, that you've been such a good friend. Good friend. I can only bless you from the fullness of my heart. May life return to you all the goodness that you have invested in it. May God Almighty reward you for the good soul that you are. And I, for one, will remain eternally grateful for all that you've meant to me. You've done well, as in the parable that Jesus taught. Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Well done.